Hello everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on measuring the ROI of IT operations. Today, we'll dig into how you can quantify the benefits of IT operations and visualize them in terms of cost savings or dollar returns. Before we begin, let me walk you through some basics. If you have any questions during the session or wish to add a point of your own, please leave a message in the chat option in the left panel of your screen. You can also email your questions or concerns to me using the email address on your screen. Next, let's look at the agenda for this session. Today, we'll explore some familiar problems in measuring the return on investment of IT operations and explore how analytics can help you overcome them. We'll also track and compare IT spending against its return on investment. In fact, we'll refer to a survey and analyze how organizations across the globe spend their IT budgets and visualize how these expenses generate ROI. We'll also try to correlate data from different factions of IT and the business to understand how IT services benefit the business. And finally, we'll look into how you can achieve a unified view of IT operations using advanced analytics. Now, let's quickly explore the challenges in measuring the return on investment of IT operations. IT is the cornerstone of the business. It keeps the business operational, provides services and support when things aren't working. IT ensures that employees have all the necessary equipment, tools, and technologies to keep them productive. Despite its immense contribution, IT is still viewed as the cost center of business. Now, why is that? It's primarily because of the way business is structured. The core mission of IT is to provide support and services and ensure that things are working as they should. But this makes for a huge disconnect between IT and the business. Since most of the business benefits delivered by IT can't be quantified, they're often not taken into account. For instance, let's say the IT team works day and night to avoid a major network disruption. In the eyes of the business, everything is as it is because they didn't have any hindrance to their work. Another major hurdle in calculating the return on investment of IT operations is that data is primarily owned by the business. IT has minimal visibility into the business data. This makes it impossible for IT to measure its return on investment. The solution is quite simple. All you have to do is put business and IT data together. This involves bringing IT data into analytics initiatives that is traditionally done only with business data. This will help IT leaders and business leaders better visualize the role of IT in achieving business goals. This also enables IT to strategize its operations and apply analytics to demand forecasting, operational optimization, and deliver services to support the business. Now, let's start with how IT budgets are structured in large enterprises. A 2020 Digital States survey mentions that large organizations spend more than 1/4 of their IT budgets on internal staff. That's about 28%. This includes salary and benefits, overtime costs, training, and other expenses. The next top expense is contracted IT solutions providers, followed by software license purchases and cloud and other infrastructure investments. Contracted staff take about 11% of the budget, while hardware purchases and leases take about 9% of the total budget. Telecommunication services cost about 10% of the total IT budget. For this webinar, we're going to consider a fictional organization that has an overall budget of $10 million for IT operations. Now, based on this survey, I've built a graph here to show how the IT budget is spent. We have 28% of the total amount going towards IT internal staff and 16% for contracted IT solutions providers, 13% for software purchases, and another 13% for cloud investments, and 11% for contracted IT staff. These are mostly vendors. Then we have 10% telecommunications and 9% for hardware leases and purchases. Towards the end of this webinar, we'll revisit this graph and compare IT spending against its return on investment. Before we begin measuring the return on investment of each of these items, let me share a few things. For measuring return on investment, I'm going to pull in data from several IT applications and business applications and blend them together to create coherent reports. Unless you have a unified view of IT and the business in one place, it will be impossible to measure the ROI of IT operations. Wherever possible, I'll try to share information on how and from where I pulled in the data for analysis. In case where I don't, please be assured that it is possible for you to create similar reports by yourself just by blending data from your IT applications and business applications. And second thing is, I'm going to follow a process to measure the ROI of IT operations. So I'm going to pick specific metrics for each of the functional areas of IT and measure ROI using those metrics. We'll then compute the return on investment for each of these metrics on a monthly basis and use it to measure the return on investment for the whole year. Alright, let's get started. Now we look at the return on investment from improved internal IT staff performance. Because internal staff take up a lion's share of the total IT budget, that is about 28%, let's start with staff performance first. The contribution of internal staff in terms of performance improvement is a bit tricky to measure because most of the technicians' time is spent in delivering intangible benefits. But there are a few metrics that can help. One such metric is MTTR, or the mean time to resolve incidents, which is how soon your agents can resolve incidents. Now, let's go back to our analytics application. I've put together a dashboard with all the reports that I'm going to discuss with you today. Now, the first report shows you the mean time to resolve incidents for the last 2 years. You can see that the average time taken to resolve incidents is 3 hours in 2021, and the average time taken to resolve incidents in 2022 is 2 hours. That's nearly a 30% decrease in mean time to resolve incidents. Now, a 30% decrease might seem a bit impractical, but it's actually possible with AI-driven insights. Let's take the typical incident resolution process. Once an incident is detected, either by the technician or through your alerting system, the incident is assigned to the right technician, mostly a level 2 or level 3 technician. The technician then starts resolving the incident. A major part of this resolution process is root cause analysis. The technician has to go through data from monitoring applications and devices, and even has to go do a manual check if needed to find out the underlying problem and then fix it. This takes considerable amount of time. With AI-driven insights, technicians can cut down the time taken for root cause analysis by about 70%. Analytics applications embedded with artificial intelligence can perform root cause analysis automatically and pinpoint problems in seconds. The technicians can then go on to resolve the incidents without wasting time on root cause analysis. This saves countless hours of the technician's time and also helps improve mean time to resolve. incidents. In fact, AI-driven insights can solve two more problems for the IT. One is that it removes human errors in data analysis and correlation, two of the areas where humans are known to struggle with. And secondly, it can also solve the skill gap problem among technicians. Now, because artificial intelligence practically gives technicians clues into the problem, even a level 1 technician can pick up a complex problem and simply follow the protocols listed in the knowledge base and resolve the problem. This frees up level 2 and level 3 technicians so that they can focus on preventing incidents, making it possible to achieve negative mean time to resolve incidents. Now, let's see how we can calculate return on investment. According to Gartner, businesses lose about $5,600 per minute of downtime, which means that we lose an average of about $336,000 per hour of downtime. Now, let's go back to our report. We saw that the mean time to resolve incidents has decreased by 30% or 1 hour this year. So as per our calculation, we'd actually be saving $336,000 per month per incident. You can multiply this number by the number of incidents that you witness per month. Now, because this is a sample data, I'm going to go ahead and assume that there's only one incident per month. That means we save about $336,000 per month. Now, I've put together a report that shows the detailed savings from the decrease in mean time to resolve incidents for this year. Next, let's look at mean time between failures. Mean time between failures is the time between two incidents or two outages or two disruptions. This metric is used to measure reliability, availability, and serviceability of systems and components. Mean time between failures can also be used to predict when systems are likely to go down so that they can be serviced proactively and prevent the incidents from happening. Now, I have a report here that shows you the mean time between failures for the last 10 years. As you can see, there is a gradual increase in mean time between failures in the last few years, indicating that technicians are becoming more and more efficient at predicting system failure and fixing them beforehand. Now, in order to calculate return on investment on improved mean time between failures, we'll be using the earlier Gartner study that says that the cost of downtime per minute is about $5,600. Now, based on this metric, I've put together a report that shows you the return on investment from improving mean time between failures. The bars represent the variation in mean time between failures, while the line gives you the return on investment as a result of increase in mean time between failures. Now, this table provides a summary of the total cost saving or return on investment from internal IT staff performance improvements. You can see that nearly $6 million can be saved with improved internal staff performance. Mean time to resolve incidents and mean time between failures are just two of the metrics that you can use to measure return on investment of IT operations. There are other metrics, that is problem-free change implementation, uptime, customer satisfaction, increased customer engagement, reduction in service time, reduction of ticket volume, and faster technology adoption that can also be used to measure the return on investment from IT staff performance improvement. Here are a few tips to increase return on investment from internal IT staff. automate repetitive stuff, and free up level 1 and level 2 technicians so that they can be trained to handle complex incidents and service requests. I'm not going into detail about automation here because we'll be discussing more about automation in the next few slides. Next, review ticket automation rules periodically and ensure that tickets are assigned to the right technicians automatically. Usually, tickets are assigned based on technician availability rather than taking into account the current workload. This results in tickets getting bounced around from one technician to another, resulting in a wastage of time. Third, identify skill gap and provide training. Skill gap among technicians is a fundamental problem for IT. Tickets too often get delayed and are put on hold due to non-availability of skilled technicians. Identifying skill gaps and bridging skill gaps by providing adequate training to technicians will help solve this problem. Next, replace problematic infrastructure periodically. IT infrastructure needs constant attention and maintenance, just like your car. But when it gets to a point that your infrastructure costs more to maintain than to replace it, it's time to upgrade it. Otherwise, problematic assets tend to break down frequently, creating unnecessary problems that technicians have to fix. Finally, provide IT staff access to data analytics. Giving IT staff access to analytics empowers them to solve their own problems without intervention from senior management. For instance, IT teams may have a working knowledge that specific types of assets or version of software may run into some known issues in your production environment. With data backing up what they already know, IT staff can pitch this case to the senior management along with a solution. This will encourage them to solve more problems, and eventually this will contribute to a leaner and more agile IT environment. Next, we look into hardware and software assets. The next biggest share of the IT budget is taken up by hardware and software assets. Hardware assets take up 9% of the total IT budget, while software licenses and purchases take up about 13% of the IT budget. Hardware assets and software licenses are expensive, but they are a necessity for the organization to accomplish work. Investing in assets is an integral part of IT operations. You can't avoid it, but you can, however, ensure that these assets are used optimally. This will help you save costs on unused hardware and software assets. And hey, cost saved is revenue earned, right? So now we look at how using hardware assets efficiently can help you cut costs. Now, typically, hardware assets have a total average lifespan of about 5 years, after which they are either decommissioned or returned to the vendors or sold off. So if you need to get the maximum out of your hardware assets, you need to ensure they spend less time waiting on the shelves and more time in use. It's always best to start using assets as soon as you purchase them, because the more time assets remain on your shelves, the more money you lose. Now, let's go back to the reports. I've created all these reports using data from my asset management software. So the first report gives me the average shelf life for laptops. You can see that the average shelf life of laptops has decreased from 6 months in 2017 to 3.2 months in 2022. Now, this is just for laptops. Now, we'll have to create similar reports to observe the shelf life of all assets owned by the organization so that we can calculate ROI from optimized asset usage. Here's a quick calculation. Now, the cost of owning assets or the depreciation value per year is the difference between purchase cost of the asset and its salvage value divided by the total useful life of the asset. To calculate money saved by reducing the shelf life of assets, we'll have to multiply the decrease in shelf life of assets and its depreciation value. Now let's go back to the reports and see the cost saved. This report shows the cost savings by using IT assets efficiently. You can see that we've saved about $130,000 this year. Next, let's look into software licenses. Software licenses take about 13% of the total IT budget. So the best way to ensure efficient usage of software assets is to provision software only based on needs and frequently audit software usage to ensure they're used efficiently. Another benefit of auditing software usage is that it can help weed out unauthorized or pirated software from your devices. Employees are known to download and install pirated software on their laptops or other handheld corporate devices like mobile phones or tablets. When discovered, these transgressions can run up to millions of dollars in damages for the organization. We'll look into both these cases now. Let's go back to the report. Now, I've put together a Tableau view of the various software. The first column has the name of the employee, the second, the department. This is the name of the software, and we have the date of last use. This is the date when the software was last used, and the next column gives you the time elapsed since the software was last used. You can see that several software on this list were used over a year ago, which means it's time to check if employees really need the software and reassign or decommission licenses if they don't. The final column in this report shows potential for saving, wherein you can save on these licenses. As per this report, you can save nearly $150,000 per year just by rationing software assets. Next, we need to look into auditing the use of unauthorized software by employees. Here's a report that shows the list of unauthorized software that is prevalent in your devices. This data can easily be obtained from your endpoint management application or even from your asset management applications that keeps track of your hardware and software assets. The next step is for IT technicians to dig deeper and find out whether the software is pirated. And let me remind you, this is not a simple problem. A couple of years back, Nike was involved in a $15.6 million lawsuit as a result of some of its employees using unlicensed software. The cost of damages from using pirated software is just beyond measure. As a best practice, frequently run checks and ensure you remove unauthorized apps from corporate devices. So far, we've discussed various ways organizations can save on asset investments by optimizing hardware and software asset usage. To quantify the intrinsic benefit of hardware and software investments, you can compare the year-on-year productivity of employees against the year-on-year spending on hardware and software assets. Here's a report that shows you the IT spend versus revenue per employee. You can see that with an increase in IT spending, there's a considerable increase in the revenue per employee. For calculating return on investment, I'm going to assume 10% of the total revenue per employee as the contribution from IT. Here's the report. Now, if you feel this approach unfairly takes away the individual effort put in by the employees, you can leave this metric out. The table here gives you the summary of cost savings from efficient use of hardware and software assets. You can see that the total return on investment is about $329,000. Next, let's look at a few tips to increase return on investment from hardware and software assets. Hardware and software assets are a huge investment for the IT department. So the best way to ensure you get the maximum out of them is to ensure they're used as soon as they're purchased. Reduce the shelf life of assets and increase their active life. Another thing that we're increasingly observing is that owing to the recent hybrid work environment, IT help desks are seeing a fair share of coffee spills on keyboards and laptops that were accidentally dropped, mobile phones that were misplaced or lost. A little caution while handling assets that belong to the organization can go a long way in keeping assets safe, prevent breakages, and repair. This can help minimize the workload on IT staff. As far as software licenses are concerned, purchase them only upon request, and most importantly, audit software usage to ensure they're actually used by employees. Often, software licenses are renewed automatically without checking if employees are currently using them. A monthly audit of software licenses and software usage can help reduce the number of inactive licenses and ensure efficient use of software assets. Next, prevent pirated software from being installed in your devices. Use of pirated software in organizational devices have serious consequences in terms of fines or lawsuits. Periodic audits should be able to turn the spotlight on pirated software used by employees. IT teams can then send out notifications and alert employees to remove such software from their devices. Finally, ensure that software licenses are renewed on time and make sure you don't use software beyond the contract period. Next, we'll take up contracted IT solutions providers who take up 16% of the total IT budget. They're mostly external consultants who help the organization implement new changes, discover problems, and come up with solutions. In short, they are people who help the IT trim down their process and reduce their problems. Some of the examples for the solutions they provide include changing a legacy system to state-of-the-art technology, reinventing a service process, or equipping the IT team to handle a surge in requests because of hybrid work. One of the most important solutions that IT consultants can provide is implementing automation. There are two ways to check if the solutions implemented by these consultants are actually helpful. One is ticket volume and the other is time to resolve tickets. If there's a decrease in ticket volume or if there's a decrease in the ticket resolution time, it means that the solutions that they provided are actually effective. Let's go back to the report. So one of the ways to check if the solutions are successful is to compare the historical trend of ticket volume against the current volume. From the graph, it's clear that the ticket volume is below average for this year. To calculate the return on investment, we're going to use a formula. That is, difference in ticket volume into $22. $22 is the average cost per ticket according to a stats by help desk. Now here's the report that we built using this formula. This report shows the return on investment from a decrease in ticket volume. Besides reduced ticket volume, Process level changes implemented by contract solutions providers should result in faster resolutions. That is, the average resolution time should be less than what it was before. Now let's explore this report. The report here shows a reduction in the average time taken to resolve tickets by category. Again, all of these data are year-to-date values. So you can see there's a considerable decrease in the average time taken to resolve tickets in each category. According to the same stats that we used earlier, that is help desk stats, the cost per minute to service the ticket is about $1.54. So the cost saved can be calculated like this. That is difference in time taken to resolve tickets multiplied by the number of tickets, that again multiplied by the cost per minute. Now let's compile the savings from contracted IT service providers into a table. From this table, it's clear that contracted IT service providers contribute about $241,000 in terms of return on investment. Next, let's move on to infrastructure investments that take up about 13% of the total IT budget. Driven by the need to support a hybrid workforce and the need to digitize their operations, businesses are rewiring their operations towards a cloud-agnostic future. Among the top benefits of moving to the cloud are increased security, performance, reliability, compliance, better disaster recovery, and cost savings. According to one of our recent surveys, 83% of our customers are moving to the cloud or have plans to migrate their applications to the cloud in the near future. In fact, 75% of our customers use 2 or more public cloud servers, while 40% of them use 3 or more cloud service providers. We also have several customers who've opted for a hybrid infrastructure. Given the sudden drive towards cloud, it's important to be cautious in spending on cloud infrastructure. Here are a few tips to optimize cloud infrastructure usage. Organizations can opt for multi-cloud environments and run different applications on different cloud infrastructures based on their application and the workloads. For applications that are run occasionally, cloud infrastructure can be used on demand. It's common for development teams to launch an environment for demo purpose and use it just for about 2 to 3 hours. In this case, a pay-per-use model is ideal where users can only pay for the 2 or 3 hours that the infrastructure was used. In fact, you can optimize your cloud cost by running a development environment only during the working hours of your DevOps team instead of using it 24/7. This can help you save cost. Another option is to run only the most expensive components on the cloud and opting for the pay-per-use model. This way, infrastructure elements that run regularly can be moved to in-house data centers to save costs. Let's go back to the dashboard. Now, I've built a sample dashboard that shows the Amazon AWS infrastructure usage. You can see that 14 EC2 instances have been purchased, while only 4 to 6 of those instances have been used regularly, and 10 of those instances were used in March. Similarly, 18 RDS instances were purchased, however, only 2 or 4 RDS instances were ever used regularly, and in March 22, 6 RDS instances were used. Now, just by surrendering these unused instances, organization can save on infrastructure cost. By applying the principles we just discussed and using the information on this dashboard, this fictional organization was able to save $890,000 by surrendering unused cloud infrastructure. Now, to calculate the ROI of infrastructure spending, Let's also look at the average uptime and downtime trends per month for the last 5 years. This report gives you the uptime and downtime trends. Uptime is represented by the green bars and downtime is represented by the red bars. You can see that there's a sharp decrease in downtime in the last 2 years. To calculate the return on investment from a decrease in downtime, we need to use a formula. That is decrease in downtime multiplied by the number of months multiplied by 5,600. 5,600 is the cost per minute of downtime as per Gartner. We've also used the stats earlier in this session. Now let's add all the cost saved to a table. From the table, it's clear that the organization can save a staggering $2 million through optimal use of cloud infrastructure and by reducing downtime. Now, this leaves us with the last two components in our IT budget, which is telecommunications and contracted IT staff or vendors. These are intangible components whose return on investment cannot be directly measured, unlike all the earlier components. Telecommunications include both internal and external communications. For instance, when internal staff reach out to end users to provide feedback, updates, and get more details from users. Now, ROI of these two components can only be tracked as a measure of overall employee happiness. Let's switch to the dashboard. Happiness index is a measure of how happy end users or employees are with your services and support. This is somewhat based on customer satisfaction rating. Happiness index has a direct impact on employee productivity and thereby the revenue that each employee can contribute. The report here compares the relationship between IT spending and employees' happiness index. As you can see, with an increase in IT spending, there's an increase in happiness index. Now, I've quantified the benefit from increased happiness index at $380,000. This brings us to the end of the webinar. Here's a detailed summary of the return on investment from IT operations. You can see that for an investment of about $10 million, I get a return of investment of about $9 million. Now, let's visualize this in our report. During the beginning of this webinar, I showed you a report that discusses the IT spend into different factions. Now, here is a similar report that shows the ROI from IT operations. You can clearly visualize the contribution from each component of IT. During the session, we discussed how IT is no longer just the cost center of the organization and that it can generate revenue actively through its many service offerings. Now it's time for you to start tracking the return on investment of your IT operations. The reports and dashboards that I showed you today were built using Analytics Plus, ManageEngine's IT analytics application. Analytics Plus integrates out of the box with several popular IT applications such as ServiceNow, Zendesk, Jira, as well as ManageEngine's Desktop Central, Service Desk Plus, App Manager, Applications Manager, Mobile Device Manager, Patch Manager, and Password Manager Pro. Analytics Plus also integrates with business apps such as Microsoft Dynamics CRM, HubSpot CRM, Xero, QuickBooks, Sage Accounting, Stripe, Shopify, Teamwork, LinkedIn, Google Analytics, Facebook, and many other apps. If you don't see your application on the screen, just leave a +1 in the chat icon in the left panel of your screen, and I'll get in touch with you to show you how you can integrate your application with Analytics Plus. Using Analytics Plus, You can get out of the box reports and dashboards that enable you to uncover instant insights into your IT data. You can use Analytics Plus's built-in AI assistant, Zia, to gain automated insights into your IT data. Using Analytics Plus, you can blend data from multiple applications, databases, and data sources to get a unified view of your IT. Using Analytics Plus, you can also drill down and get deeper into the why behind important KPIs and metrics. You can get real-time alerts into changes in your data via in-app notifications or email notifications. Using Analytics Plus, you can perform historical data analysis, trend analysis, anomaly detection with minimal human effort. You can also apply Analytics Plus's forecasting engines to predict future trends in your IT data. You can also schedule report runs and receive IT-related updates straight in your inbox. You can also use in-app report commenting feature to collaborate with your team contextually. If you're interested in trying Analytics Plus, just scan the QR code on your screen to sign up and talk to one of our experts. We'll get in touch with you and help you set up Analytics Plus for free. That's about it from my end. Thank you all for taking the time to attend the session today. I hope you found the session useful. If you have any questions or if you're interested in learning more about how advanced analytics can help you keep track of your IT operations, do write to me at the email address on your screen. I would love to talk to you about the latest trends and solutions for IT. So do reach out. That's it from me. Thank you, folks.